There is no real past. There is no real future, right? But the life we live as a function of agreement is that time is real. We all obey time. We function with time, right? We all believe in time. We all believe in space. We all believe in our identity. We all believe without question, and this is an interesting thing, when you start to wake up, when you start to come out of this dream, it's amazing because it's hard to believe that you believed what you were believing. Isn't it? When you start to wake up, it's hard to believe that you were believing what you were believing. What does that mean? It's hard to believe that you had believed that you are a identity called a personality that gets generated in thinking, right? This identity called the personality that gets generated in thinking does not actually exist. Now, most of us will live our entire life and never discover that that's the case, right? And if that's so, your life will be a very limited situation. You know, I was listening to a teacher talk about this the other day, and they said that if your life is being lived in the confines of your limited conditioning and your limited personality, you're basically in prison. And worse than that, because your limited personality and your limited understanding of what's true and who you are is isolated to your personality. You're living inside that personality. So it's not just prison, it's solitary confinement. Right? You're living in a solitary confinement, right? But the problem with that is most people don't know they're living in this condition called solitary confinement or prison because everybody's living in that condition, and so nobody sees it. And, you know, if everybody's crazy, we're all sane. You know, if we're all living in this very limited solitary confinement condition, none of us are, because none of us can see that that's the case, right? Because we're all living in the same dream. Now, the thing about this that makes these teachings and the practices so important is that that condition produces suffering. Condition produces suffering. It produces stress. It produces pressure. It produces anxiety. It produces terror. It produces frustration. It produces anger, right? And so we're living our life in this intense condition, right? This stressful condition that wears the body out, right? That creates a personality that's unstable, right? Because there's uncertainty is the hallmark of the personality, right? The personality is never quite sure what's true and what's real. It's always trying to figure it out, always trying to find out how to be happy, always trying to find out, you know, how to have this situation I'm in work. How do I get my life to work? How do I get my relationships to work? How do I relax? You know, how do I experience satisfaction? How do I find peace of mind? You know, given the predicament that I'm in here, given the situation that we're all experiencing, right? The world is an unstable situation, right? All you have to do is watch the news, right? And what's the news keep presenting to us, right? Instability, fear, concern, threats, right? Threats to your safety, threats to your happiness, threats to your money, threats to your security, right? So the world is an unstable situation, and in the teachings they talk about that as a condition of impermanence. Everything is in constant flux. Everything's changing all the time. You know, we don't really notice these things. One of the things about meditation and these teachings is if you begin to focus your attention and you begin to open your mind, you begin to become receptive. You begin to consider the possibility that there is a reality that you haven't yet seen. There is an identity that you have not yet realized that is the truth of who you are. There is a truth about what is so, what the reality is. And so through meditation, by calming the mind down, by getting this activity to slow down, and by relaxing the body, we can begin to see. We can begin to see. I was listening to a teacher the other day talk about the fact that, and this surprised me because it was actually coming from an ancient teaching where a student said to the teacher, how will I know when I meet the true self? How will I know when I meet the real self? And the teacher said, find the one without a head. That's what he said. Find the one without a head, and then you'll know that you've met the true self. So that the person went out and started looking to try and find somebody without a head, right? And after a while, he came back to the teacher and he said, I looked and I looked and I looked and I couldn't find anybody without a head. And he said, well, the teacher said, well, the reason that you didn't find anybody without a head is because you are looking from a headless place. And that really caught my attention because I had studied Douglas Harding, right? Douglas Harding was a guy who's, he traveled in India and he studied the teachings and all that. But like a lot of people who studied the teachings and practices, he was still a seeker. He still hadn't yet experienced the truth for himself. And one day when he was reading a book, he saw an illustration in the book of a guy who did a self-portrait, and he drew a portrait of himself from looking at his own body. So the picture showed his body. If you were to look down at your body right now, that would be the self-portrait that he drew. And when Harding saw that, he said, that's it. That's it. I'm headless. I will never see my head. You will never see your head in your life, right? So the story of the teacher is basically find the headless one. You're the headless one. And so he said, when you find the headless one, you'll find your true nature. You'll find your true self. And Douglas Harding went on to create a whole series of experiments where you could actually experience seeing from this void, seeing from this space that the eyes are looking out from. We're so highly conditioned that we never slow down and recognize the fact that that your eyes aren't seeing, your eyes are being used to see. Your ears aren't hearing, your ears are being used to hear, right? Oh, so what is seeing through your eyes? What is hearing through your ears? And you can actually do some of the experiments that are on the website called the Headless Way, in which you can actually experience being headless. You can actually experience that right here where your head is supposed to be. I mean, you can do this right now. Where your head is supposed to be, there's space there, is there not? There's no head, but there's space there. There's an awareness there happening, right? And if you move your hands back like this, they go out of the awareness. When you come back, they go back into the awareness, right? So this is actually called seeing, right? This is called seeing. And you can actually practice seeing, meaning that you're seeing things as they are, because normally what we see is an interpretation of what we're looking at. That's normally what we see. When you look at somebody, you're seeing an interpretation of what you're looking at. Your brain processes the data and then has you see what the interpretation tells you you're looking at, right? But if you slow down and you practice these headless experiments, you can start noticing that there's a different way of seeing. But you have to understand how to see that way. And one of the ways that Douglas Harding talked about is he said, if you're driving in a car, you and I learn that we're driving in a car. The car's moving and the world stays still, right? But if you practice seeing, you can actually look out the window of your car, out the windshield of your car, and see that the car is not moving and the world's moving. You can actually flip it like that and see it that way. You can actually see it that way. When I used to take my dog for a ride in the car, I used to watch him because the dog has not learned that the car is moving. We learned that. The dog didn't learn that. So the dog's in the car, the dog looks around in the car and he sees that everything is not moving in the car, and then he looks out the window and the world's moving. And he's really excited, to see the whole world move like that, right? So Harding said that's actually what's going on. If you're looking from awareness, right, the awareness is not moving. Your awareness never moves. Your awareness is stillness. That's why when we practice meditation, we're practicing staying still. We're practicing being silent so we could see what's always there that we don't notice. By staying still and being silent, we can begin to witness from awareness instead of see what our conditioning tells us is happening. It's a different experience, right? It's a different experience. And what they say in the teachings is that when you start to experience this, you're waking up. You're coming out of the conditioning. You're starting to see things as they actually are. You're starting to see what's true about you. You're starting to understand that you've been being a ghost. You've been practicing being an identity that doesn't exist. The only place this identity exists that you've been practicing is in the thinking activity. The only way you know who you are is that you think that you know who you are. That's the only way you know who you are, is that you think you know who you are. If somebody has a serious head injury and they lose their memory, they can't remember who they are. Which means who you and I think we are is a memory. You learned it, you built on what you learned, right? You created a personality over the years, right? And how did you do that? You took things from other people that you liked and added that to your personality. You mocked other people, you copied other people and added things to your personality, right? And you tried to be an efficient, effective personality by understanding how things work so you can avoid any threats to your personality and you could get things that enhances your personality, right? But this process is a thought process that's going on all the time. And just like the breath, because it's going on all the time and because we believe in it, because we believe it's telling us the truth, right? We believe that the thinking activity is presenting us with facts, right? So we don't question it. Nobody questions their identity, right? For most people, they would think that was crazy. That's stupid to question your identity. Why would you question your identity? Your identity is obvious. Everybody's identity is obvious. What do you mean you don't know who you are? What do you mean you want to find out who you are? That's crazy talk to most people, right? Well, the reality of it is, if you slow down and start to pay attention, you realize that the only way that you know who you are is because of the thought process that keeps presenting you with the idea that you have about who you are. And what is that idea? You believe that you're the physical body, and you believe that you're this conditioned personality. And that's what you're living your life. You're living your life as the body and the personality. And the evidence, when you start to meditate and you slow down and you start to see things as they are, the evidence is very clear that that's not the case. The evidence is very clear that that's not the case. That what you are is not something that can be identified through thinking. No, that what you are takes us back to the stage that we were at when you were an infant. You couldn't think then, right? You couldn't think then, you didn't have language then, so you couldn't have a personality. A baby doesn't have a personality, right? A baby's in what they call the natural state. The baby's experiencing its true identity, which is awareness itself. So the baby's there, the baby's aware, right? And the baby's aware of the baby's body, the baby's aware of the environment. And when the baby's experiencing hunger, it cries. When it's satisfied, it smiles. It's the direct relationship with the environment. No interpretation, right? But then as the baby gets older and we teach it language, right? We introduce it to the world of thought. When you teach a baby language, you introduce it to the world of thought. And when you're introducing the baby to the world of thought, the way generally and collectively we understand that is we're educating the baby to reality. That's what we think we're doing. We're introducing the baby to the truth. In reality, we're introducing the baby into the dream of who they will think they are, right? Among all the people in the world that think that they're who they think they are, and then the game gets played that way. Time, space, and identity, now you can play the game, right? The only problem is because that's not true, because it's not true, it doesn't work. Because it's not true, suffering occurs. Suffering occurs. So meditation is a way of slowing down and paying attention and starting to observe thinking, start to observe emotions, learn about the teachings that have been handed down centuries after centuries about the truth, right? And then when you get consistent enough in the practice of meditation and you want to understand the truth clearly enough, then the next phase is to start to practice being awake and aware and experiencing the truth moment to moment in your ordinary life. And when that happens, right, when that happens, you start to experience a spontaneous experience of well-being. You start to experience a spontaneous experience of what's called happiness, satisfaction, well-being, and peace of mind. Why? Because your original nature, your true nature, your natural state is happy. It's happy all the time. It doesn't know how to be unhappy. Its happiness is a function of its experience of its own existence. This is very important to understand. The fact that you exist doesn't produce happiness for most personalities. The fact that you exist doesn't matter to most people, does it? No. I didn't ask to be born, I exist. So what? I exist. Now what? Now what? Right? That's what happens when the conditioning is operating, right? But when you get freed up from that conditioning and you start to experience what it's like to be you start to experience what it's like to be in the natural state, you start to experience the satisfaction, well-being, peace of mind, and happiness that's available every moment of your life when you're experiencing being the awareness that is the natural state, which is your true identity. Therefore, happiness is always available. Therefore, peace of mind is always available. Therefore, satisfaction is always available. But it's not available when you're distracted. It's not available when you're operating in a thought process, right, that's dissatisfied. It's never satisfied. Right? The thought process and the identity that people believe is the truth is never satisfied. It doesn't present itself clearly as dissatisfaction because there are moments of pleasure. There are moments of gratification, right? Just enough to keep you in the game. Just enough to keep you making the money. Just enough to keep you trying to get more money, get more possessions. So what does your life look like? What does your life look like when you're living in this conditioned state? Your life is about sleeping, eating, having sex if you're fortunate. Sleeping, eating, having sex, making money. What else? Buying things, accumulating material possessions, distracting yourself by watching a reality on a little box, right? So that you don't have to deal with your own life, right? And then you go to sleep and you get up the next day and you do it again. And you do it again and again and again and again, right? And there's these little pockets of gratification. We call them holidays, right? There's Christmas. That's when we can celebrate. That's when we can enjoy ourselves. That's when we can relax. Oh, really? Oh, really? If you're really paying attention at Christmas, you realize people are trying to do it. They're trying to get gratification. They're trying to get a sense of well-being by spending a lot of money, getting bigger things, better things, giving gifts, getting gifts, right? But if you're really going to pay attention, you start to notice that the underlying anxiety is still there. And the satisfaction doesn't last long at all. Right? So meditation is a practice that can get you to slow down and wake up and see things as they are, and then start practicing living in the real world and being who you really are. That's the bottom line. Gabish?